everybody. It's the Prehospital Paradigm Podcast. I'm Scott Wildenheim. Got Caleb Ferroni and Ray Pace and Dr. John Hill with us yet again. Special 5-part series for all of 24. So what we're doing is we're doing a ongoing sub-series on EMS airway management. All right, so stay tuned for this installment of EMS Airways. All right, so we're on to the supraglottics. Onto the supraglottics now.
Meaning above the glottic opening?
Above the glottic, yes.
Is that what
above
that
the, yeah. Or extraglottic, which is outside of the glottic opening. Or biad.
Words and such.
A bunch of different words here all mean exactly the same thing, right? Which is something, a type of airway that
blind insertion airway device.
A blind insertion airway device. Something we're talking about that does not pass through the vocal cords and resides higher than thou. Of course, great point, and this is a state of Ohio scope of practice thing, is our EMT providers are allowed to use these. They are all still classified.
Pulseless and apneic patients.
They are still all classified as advanced airways, and still gives us some sort of an airway adapter to hook up to a BVM or a ventilator or whatever we're hooking up to. But EMTs in the state of Ohio are absolutely permitted to place a blind insertion device. You've hit the nail on the head. Our scope of practice in the state of Ohio is specific to pulseless and apneic for the EMT provider, and apneic patients for the advanced EMT provider. And that follows, that apnea thing also follows over to intubation for the advanced EMT as well. The advanced EMT is allowed to intubate, and we'll talk about intubation separately. I guess let's just start with the arc and the trajectory of all of the supraglottics and where we're at today as far as thought process. So certainly when I went to paramedic school, if you didn't have an endotracheal tube, you were a crappy paramedic, right? Mm-hmm. You had to do the thing. It was the gold standard. And I think up until a couple of years ago, the trend was to supraglottics, but we didn't have a tremendous volume of data to support where it was just instinctively kind of going, right? And in recent history, there was always that, hey, this still can't be as good as endotracheal intubation. And then the most recent, the two things, the PART, P-A-R-T, and the Airways 2 trial, I'm going to paraphrase and just kind of sum that at least, right, from an outcomes perspective, at least the same as endotracheal intubation from outcomes, right? Go read those in their own. There's nuances in both of those studies. One actually found a superiority to supraglottics and outcomes. One had it was weighted a little bit the other way, averaged out. There's at least equivalency is kind of, I think, what take home point for most everybody. So in today's world, from an outcomes perspective, whether you manage with a supraglottic or whether you manage with endotracheal intubation, throwing out some very, very exclusive patient populations that probably should be intubated, right? There's a few cases, airway burns or something. Okay, you need something that goes through the glottic opening. Long term. All right, but let's just say your prototypical cardiac arrest or your prototypical respiratory arrest. You're not doing any disservice, certainly, by using a supraglottic in the pre-hospital space.
Well, and what I tell my squads is sometimes they would get heated at some of the other hospitals for placing a supraglottic device. Anesthesia, which claim to be the king of all airways, they are king of all airways. They are not the king of the crashing airway. That is our realm.
You're going to separate those out.
Yeah, very separate. Anesthesia will use these devices exclusively for airway protection and ventilation of a patient during short cases.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
For 45 minutes, an hour. They want this device, they don't want to intubate. So in those cases, this has become superior and the standard of care. So if it's okay for as a bridging device, right? Sometimes you need to just get an airway in. You put a supraglottic airway in.
Buy time. Yep.
King, Joe, whatever you want, to buy time to ventilate the patient, to resuscitate the patient, stabilize the patient, and then have a better attempt at place that ET tube. But this can stay in for an hour. Multiple hours.
Yeah. And taking into account some of the provider's experience. It may be the safer thing for the patient, right?
Yes.
If I'm not let's say, even though I've been doing this for a long time, I'm not good at laryngoscopy, right? I'm bad at it, right? You have to kind of know that about yourself. Like, wait, what tool do I need to, preferentially work towards for the safety of my patient, right? The ego part of it should be diminishing. I wish it was gone, but oh, I want it too. Okay, cool. Everybody wants to, but we got to do what's right for the patient. Sometimes the answer is a endotracheal tube, but again, we got to take that holistic approach of everything with the patient, right?
Well, and we talked earlier about preparation. I talk about my plan to fail. On my plan to fail is
correct.
A supraglottic airway. That is one of my plans to fail.
Absolutely. Let's talk about that very quickly. I think the general cards that most everybody has is a supraglottic backup to my an endotracheal intubation attempt, and then a surgical airway backup to that. You could split some differences about, do you use a bougie, do you use a different there's aids that you could kind of shove in between those cards, right? But basically those are the three big steps that you could take, right?
Yeah, and I break it down a little bit smaller than that. So I have video assist as my first. Then I can branch off and do direct. That's another step.
Yep.
I have my bougie available. If I can't get it with a bougie, then I can go towards a supraglottic. If I get my supraglottic, then it's surgical. So there's multiple steps that to get to that. Ultimately, everything ends in a cricothyrotomy, but let's hope we don't get there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Try to avoid that at all costs.
Yes.
A lot of that steps that you're taking, though, too, you've looked at the patient and made the determination, too. So that's part of your checklist that we talked about. And if you're going to take the airway, you've made a determination. This is my first attempt, so this is going to be my best attempt. I'm using this.
Yep.
So.
Yeah.
So we've talked about that the supraglottics and the Airways 2 in the PART trial really didn't single out any particular type of supraglottic. Those were mixed trials, and I believe that most of them, as I recall, were Kings. The American ones were Kings. I think the European portion of that was more LMAs. Don't quote me on that. What did not come out of that was which of the supraglottics had any type of superiority over another. It was just comparing the supraglottics to endotracheal intubation, and we came with at least equivalent, right? At least. Maybe superior in some situations, some cases. Then, as of recent, there has been one study that showed a neurological outcome superiority to iGel, and it's that data that has prompted us at university hospitals for essentially 24. We've started it here. This is being recorded in 2023, obviously at the end of 2023. But we've already started this kind of system-wide change where we had several different supraglottics. Kings were probably the most prevalent in our system, and there are a few others. There were pockets of a few others, but we're kind of standardizing and saying, hey, iGel moving forward is university hospitals' extraglottic, supraglottic biad of choice, whatever you want to term it, moving forward. And we'll talk about those particular nuances of that device here in just a second. The protocol is not changing. So if a department is electing to stay with, this is just what we're supplying, right? If they elect to stay with another, or you're using up the existing stock of what you have, or no harm, no foul, right? We're not. Yeah, we're picking what we're going to supply, but we are not mandating yet. Protocol's not going to change. We need some additional data, and we certainly need more studies to back up that one that we took action on.
Yes.
Before we say nope, absolutely can't use
Correct.
another tool, right? So we're not there yet. Any other broad
No, I just think we're giving
supraglottic topics?
I think we're just giving people options, is what that boils down to.
But again, like everything, you need to know your equipment. Capnography works with all of this. Make sure that you use it. The Kings are height-based. The iGels are weight-based. I think that's important to remember. And there's a lot more assortment sizes of the iGels than there are Kings. All the way to pediatric, which is kind of cool.